Well, hello, everyone. I have the salubrious pleasure to be joined today with someone very unique in the wine world, someone who I think is certainly spicing it up, but shaking it up as well. India Donisi. India, how are you today?
I am very well, thank you. Thank you. My last name is Donisi.
Donisi.
Donisi. It's just a tiny mix-up of letters. But yeah, I'm doing very well, and I'm very excited for our talk. I'm very happy that I could be your guest in this podcast.
Oh,
Thank you.
yeah. Well, it's a pleasure. Yeah, you're doing all the things I think wine represents. You're bringing it very much into your content, but into your reviews, into how you appreciate it, but also how you discuss it. You're bringing all the aspects of wine. You're comprising all the aspects of wine into your brand, into your content, into what you're doing, which I think is a very wonderful, very innovative, but also very like, aha, why wouldn't many people have done this? Like you incorporate all that wine is into what you're doing. And it seems very evident to me.
Thank you. That's really cool. I wonder what do you think all wine is to you? What is
Wine, oh wow. To me, I think, it's the process, the production, the history, la cultura,
Mhm.
la storia, it's everything. It's history, it's culture, it's the people, it's the soil, it's everything. It's the memories, it's the joys, it's the sorrows. You know, as they say, the senses, scent and taste is such a strong memory. We can
Mhm.
all remember a laugh, a cry, a positive, a negative, with a smell of a bouquet of a certain wine, a taste of a certain wine. So I think you incorporate that. I think even with how you do it, and also the going back to the Greeks and even pre-Greeks, the sensual and sexual element to wine too, the mystique. All these are incorporated. They're expressions in many ways too. I think it's perhaps why the connection with wine is so intricate but so rich with us, and so such a long shelf life, as it were, is because all these things are expressions of who we are as human beings, and they're also such expressions of wine too.
That's really cool. That's basically what I think about. I think about wine. All these things. It's just wine is not just to drink in a glass, right? It's
No, of
everything
course
you
not.
said: culture, history, tradition. Yeah, basically everything that we love and everything that makes our heart beat faster.
Absolutely, absolutely. What got you into wine, though? I mean, we have a shared Italian heritage, but
Mhm.
that would almost be just generic to say. But what got you so intrigued with wine?
So it's actually funny because you asked me this question, and I just go back to when I was a child. Immediately, I was I think maybe 4 or 5, and I just remember always every summer I went to Italy to stay 1 month or even longer in my nonna's house, my grandmother's house, and I remember all the adults were always drinking wine. There was just this table wine bought from the yeah a neighbor of a neighbor from the town, just a very simple basic wine that's almost like a fruit juice. It's just so yeah, it's always just
Yeah,
from the vintage of the same year, and it was just so delicious, and I always wanted to drink it, but I couldn't because I was a child, and it was always like, this is for grown-ups, for
right.
adults, and you cannot drink wine, you're a child. But I was always begging for wine, and I was yeah, it sounds a bit but it was true. I was always like, I want to try this, I want to try this. So I used to get like this little drop of red wine in my glass, and it would be always mixed with water, so I would be
Right.
feeling like it was part of the grown-ups, and I could also drink wine, and I was happy about that. And I remember growing up, slowly every year the wine got a little more in my glass and the water a little less. And at some point when I was a grown up, I was 18 years old, I think. I did my first wine course, so I was just
Right.
always intrigued by it with no specific reason. Like, I come from a wine region in Italy. My last name is Donisi, which comes from Dionysus, the god of wine,
Right.
back in Italy. So there's probably some DNA type of blood type of wine in my veins. I don't know, but
Interesante,
yeah,
interesante.
that's the story.
see that to me is so beautiful, but it's so, I think that's a story that so many people can relate to with wine. There's always that moment or series of events which, wow, got me so intrigued with it, whether as a amateur, as a novice, or in a profession of wine. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I can relate to that. My first memory, and the similar thing. It was diluted. I think and in Canada we always, if you're Italian, they dilute it with ginger ale. We
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a very Italian Canadian thing. It's a common
Red
it's a
wine, red
common
wine, or white wine?
red wine diluted with ginger ale. It's a very ill. It's a common occurrence if you're Italian Canadian.
That's
Um,
funny.
if you're growing up, yeah. I can remember my font. It wasn't a good wine by any means. It was very, a vino di tavola. It was a very basic. I think it was a blended wine, to be honest with you. But it wasn't even
Mm-hmm.
so much the wine itself. And I think that's what is so interesting. It wasn't necessarily the wine itself that had the memory, but it was the memories created around the wine that were so
Mm-hmm.
rich. It was with my bisnonno. I had my first taste of it, and it was the memories with him. It was the memories shared, the laughter,
Mm-hmm.
the stories of his childhood. And still, I can remember. I can close my eyes and remember the bouquet. Remember those moments. Remember that laughter. Not even so much about the complexity or the importance of the wine itself, but the importance of the moments that were made and cherished too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly what it is, right? The
Exactly.
memory just of the moment that you drank your first real glass of wine, or your first drops of wine, or everything that wine has meant to your family or your friends, or all the situations that you've been in with the wine. That's
Absolutely. It is in some philosophical, but also I think on a chemical level too. There's a life to wine. There's a not just a vino di storia, but there's a life to it. It is lively. It is still evolving. It's maturing, but it's
Mhm.
also has a life of its own. It
True,
carries on memories in many ways. But
true.
I'm curious though, what methods have you discovered of winemaking, or what particular varietals or styles of wines have you discovered in your journeys that you might not, that you think perhaps need to be more aware of? Most people that might not be aware of this particular style or particular wine in the world.
Well, what I find interesting is that always the history of things always has such a strong connection with the present moment. So when you think of wine and you think of the origins, and you think of four millennia ago, no, 4 millennia before Christ, or even longer ago, of for example, they use these clay amphoras, right?
Right.
These clay pots. They use them to transport the liquid, but also to ferment the liquid. So they were making wine in these clay pots, basically, which then evolved into wooden barrels and stainless steel tanks to do the same, basically. But nowadays, what you see, that there's this whole new trend of winemakers and wineries that when I visit them, we look at the barrel room, we come in there, we see all these wooden barrels, we see all the stainless steel tanks, and we see this beautiful big amphora in clay or in terracotta or in cement. And it's a trend that's just coming back now, which I think is super interesting, because we're just going back to the origin of making wine.
Right.
And now it's a whole new technique, modern, but it tastes different, and there's a lot of experiments going on. So I think that's something very interesting today, that I find very interesting. And maybe something other people don't know is that they're experimenting also with aging wine bottles under the sea. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
Right. I just recently was found out about that, but I wasn't too aware of how the studies are going, how the research is going. But I was just
Well,
informed. I thought it was very cool.
it's super interesting. They make the wine in a normal way. They put it in the bottle, then age it under the sea, and they say that the aging process sort of speeds up, um, and it's like 3 years in a cellar or 1 year under the sea. It tastes basically the same as in evolution. So it evolves quicker, but also becomes smoother. And then these bottles, they get these beautiful corals on there because these corals just grow on the bottle. So it's a
Right.
whole, it's a whole cool type of thing that is new. And if you're into wine, these experiments are very, very interesting.
Well,
I
that's
really
really
like
cool. Yeah,
the
that's really
thing.
cool. That's really
Uh-huh.
cool. No, I see that is. I mean, there is, and that's. I mean, that I think that incorporates what I'm saying. There's a life to wine. You know, we're always experimenting more with it. We're always learning more about it. We're always creating more techniques, more memories, and
Mhm.
we're always, you know, the similarity between the Primitivo from Puglia and the genetic similarity and the Zinfandel from California. They're genetically very similar. Although I would say that the Primitivo is better. That's my bias towards it.
Your bias, your Italian heart has to say that, right?
Oh yeah,
It's okay.
my foot my Pugliese heart has to say that.
You will
Um,
forget
I'm
that.
curious too, you know, in learning that about you and learning, you know, the passion, the joy, the sheer delight you have with wine. What and the fact that you incorporate all these elements, all these forms of wine into what you do. What was the origin? What was the thought process that became Wine Spice Girl?
So it's difficult to explain. It was more like it was a sort of intrinsic feeling of that there was something missing, not in the world, but more inside of me. So
Right.
I I started to really love wine, become passionate about it, study more about it, and I started to notice that there was like this sort of mystic thing around wine where I felt like you had to belong to a certain group or you had to be very intelligent or you had to talk very, very serious about wine because it was
Right.
dead serious. You could not make a joke because wine was just so holy and so serious, and for a certain group of people that you had to belong to, that you had to sort of prove yourself to in order to be accepted and to belong to that group. Well, I was like, that's very interesting because when I drink wine, those are the most joyous moments of my life.
Yeah.
There are a lot of jokes when I drink wine. There's a lot of dancing involved. There's a lot of laughter involved, a lot of joy, a lot of passion, a lot of love. So how come that when we start to talk about wine, it all has to be in this sort of very conventional, very predictable, very traditional way? I was just a little bit confused about that. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if I would be able to express my love for wine in a, call it unconventional way, but in a liberating way, or in a way that I would like to communicate about wine.
Right.
So I thought, maybe I cannot do it because, people will judge me or people will think that I'm completely crazy. So why not just create an alter ego called Wine Spice Girl who can, because she can do whatever she wants, right?
I
Because
like this. I like this.
yeah,
I
so
like that.
that's a bit how it went.
See, that's in that to me is more than interesting. That's actually insightful and fascinating. It actually tells me a lot about you because I think that going on the philosophical,
Mm,
I think that actually is a and I like I use the word liberated because I think it actually is. I think there's a homage I think to your last name. I think there's a
mm,
Dionysian aspect to that. There, you're reopening the Dionysian aspect of wine, the dancing,
yeah,
the joy, not just the narrow, the academic, the talking about it in
yeah.
very sterile language. I mean, it's not sterile. It's alive. It's fluid in every sense.
Oh,
You
absolutely.
know, it's a very salubrious beverage. It has a life of its own. So I think that's very interesting, and I think that's what draws me to you to your work. Actually, is the fact that you
Mhm.
incorporate that very much. It's not just I'm sitting by a table with a pen reviewing some wine. No,
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it. It's in my blood. It's in my sangue. I'm really incorporating it into my day, into my life, into my activity. Um, so I think there is that there. I think that might be a homage to your origin, your last name there. It's the Dionysian aspect. It's coming out. You know,
It is. It is.
yeah. That's interesting though. So
Uh-huh.
what and in keeping with that too, what do you think about, that's actually a good jumping off topic with that element within the wine industry, perhaps the non-conventional, as you say. I think it's a good point of saying that. How do you how do you not, maybe not reconcile, but how do you talk about how do more people talk about the way you talk about wine and the way I would talk about wine, and the fact that it's not just some sterile thing. It's a very alive thing. It's a sensual beverage. It's there for the ballare. It's there for the dances. It's there for the sorrow. It's there for the joy. It's there for the amorous and the sensual. It's a crimson red beverage. How do you think more people should be talking about wine as opposed to just reading a label and saying, oh, it's from a certain varietal, it's from this region, being very academic about it? How do you think people should liberate themselves from that kind of world?
I'll try to answer your question. So how to get people to think about wine the way we think about it, beyond the bottle, in a more way, or in a, let's say, way, I would say. What I think, the only thing that I can do from my side is to inspire people. That's all I can do. I cannot make people think. I cannot change their thinking. I can only show my my point of view. That's what I'm trying to do, to show that wine is fun, to show the aspects of wine that people maybe haven't thought about, to communicate it in a more cheerful and more joyful way, to connect it to humor, connect it to sensuality, to dance, to singing, even to whatever it is that that I feel when I think of wine or when I talk about wine. So that's the way that I try to change the world, by just showing the world, the wine world, through my eyes, and hopefully inspiring, especially I think a younger generation, to look at wine a little. I'll try to answer your question. So how to get people to think about wine the way we think about it, beyond the bottle, in a more emotional way, or in a, let's say, way, I would say. What I think, the only thing that I can do from my side is to inspire people. That's all I can do. I cannot make people think. I cannot change their thinking. I can only show my my point of view. That's what I'm trying to do, to show that wine is fun, to show the aspects of wine that people maybe haven't thought about, to communicate it in a more cheerful and more joyful way, to connect it to humor, connect it to sensuality, to dance, to singing, even to whatever it is that that I feel when I think of wine or when I talk about wine. So that's the way that I try to change the world, by just showing the world, the wine world, through my eyes, and hopefully inspiring, especially I think a younger generation, to look at wine a little.
I think you're certainly doing exactly what you set out to do. I said you certainly have inspired me. I think it's refreshing to see my thoughts, my perspective on wine, elaborated in your pursuit and in your whole brand of Wine Spice Girl. It's refreshing to me because I talk about wine, in the same way I think you do, but I think, again, I want to say, in one sense, it's part of being Italian, but I think it goes beyond that. I talk about wine the same way I would talk about, a great piece of music, a great dance, a great evening out for dinner with friends and laughter. It's something that's alive. It's incorporated. Yeah, 100%. It's not some sterile thing. It's very much a livid experience. And, with every sip, you're experiencing something new. With respect to what we're saying about culture, you're really incorporating that culture of that region, that area, into you. You're getting an understanding of the terroir. You're getting an understanding of the people, their history.
Oh,
There's so
absolutely.
much to it.
There's
Um,
so much.
yeah. And, it's of all, it's interesting too, amid the salubrious, the amorous, the sensual,
Mhm.
it incorporates so much. But what do you think, or rather, why might you think that of all the beverages, of all the food, the condiments out there, why do you think it's wine that humanity has had such a strong, intricate, and intimate relationship with? Of all the things out there, wine seems to be that thing which, whether continent or country, it's the lingua franca.
Uh-huh. Well, it's interesting because I think there's maybe different answers, but so one very obvious answer is obviously that when we drink wine, it contains alcohol, which gives us neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, and just gives us happy hormones, and makes us basically feel as if we are rewarded when we drink wine. So
Right.
it makes us literally happy, which is something that if it makes you happy, you want more of it, and you want to keep it close to you, and you want to, yeah, to drink wine. So I think that's one part, maybe what was very important in the beginning, to make us
Right.
sort of maybe addicted to it a little bit, right? We want this liquid, and because it makes us happy. And then there's the whole cultural part where wine is connected to so many layers of our society, so for so long. Like,
Right.
it started with the religion used to be this huge part of people's lives, and wine was the blood. Wine was everything, basically. Wine was there for good moments and bad moments in church, and then spread out to families, and to weddings and funerals and everything that is related to emotion. And then it got so, into our everyday lives of celebration, and of conversation, of, yeah, the philosophers, when they were
Yes.
having these evenings, they were sitting together talking about the most important things on the planet. they
Right.
they they drank wine. They the greatest leaders of all time, they had wine. It was everywhere. So I think, yeah, it has just this meaning for us that is so important.
Absolutely. No, everimento, everimento. I think you're spot on with that one. It is true because it is, I think, it's a good observation there. It is the wine of kings and queens. It is the wine of everyday people. It is the vino di tavola, wherever
Yeah.
that table is, whether it's a working table, a family table, a table of sadness, sorrows, happiness, joys, a table that, a banquet for a marriage. It's always present. It
Uh-huh.
is, and I think you're right. It has meaning still for us. In a world where we're always trying to find meaning for our lives, there is that one constant beverage that has some sort of connectivity, continuity and connection, perhaps, with what we are and who we are. It's a memory holder and a memory maker and a meaning holder in many ways.
Absolutely.
It
Absolutely.
is a very interesting beverage. I like how you incorporate the religious aspect too, because you might say even beyond religion, and certainly prior to Judeo-Christianity and those religious faiths, wine has this sacrosanct element to it. I'm always reminded of Sangiovese, the blood of
Mm-hmm.
Jupiter.
Uh-huh.
It really, there is that connection already back in antiquities
Oh,
with
absolutely.
this is
Agreed.
so, oh yeah.
Everything.
So it's that really rich connection, and I it's a fascinating liquid. I think when you can, as we were saying yesterday in a pre-chat, when you can get to the point where it's not just enjoyment, which you should, whatever that wine is, enjoy it with friends, family, lovers, what have you. But when you can also incorporate the appreciation of that wine, the appreciation of all that wine is, all the forms of it, you also directly obtain an understanding of wine, a richer understanding, a complexer understanding of that wine. And
Absolutely.
I think that's what you represent too in your work. You represent, hey, it's not just this beverage in a bottle that we all like, yeah, red or white, what have you, but it's more. it's a cultural aspect. It's a religious element. It's a religion of dance, of sorrow, of sadness, of joys. And if you're feeling down, it'll pick you up too. It's a little bit of everything. I think it's a very appropriate name, Wine Spice Girl, because I think vino is it's a spice of life. It adds to everything. It enhances the flavor of life in all it has too. And I think that's something that's been true for time immemorial.
Yeah, I like how you put it. It is absolutely true. I couldn't agree more. I think that we're on the same passionate level of wine.
Yeah. I think some people are going to say, well, I think you've talked way too much. We're just crazy wine people here. But there is a beautiful complexity to it. I mean, even on a more technical level, even just the history of winemaking, that's a beautiful process. It wasn't some overnight thing. It was trial and error. There's so many times I can the Chateau Neuf de Pas, it wasn't made on purpose. It was an accident. It's an interesting how certain things come about, and yet even when in the decline of civilizations, wine has always remained constant. It's interesting how that has always been a pertinent topic of our lives in many ways, of civilization, of history, of culture, of people.
Yeah, I read that they said that the moment we settled down as a society, the moment we stopped moving, was the moment we started to make wine, which is beautiful because, of course, when we were nomads and we were always traveling, it was hard to make wine. But the moment that we settled down and started to build villages and towns and cities was the moment we started to plant vines and to make wine, really. So that says a lot, right? That says a lot about us, about how much we like it.
Absolutely.
And how much part of life it is. And this dates back a long time ago.
Absolutely. I mean, the history of winemaking just in of itself. I mean, in many ways, it's funny when we compare contemporary methods or contemporary ways of preservation of wine. And if you go back perhaps even to the ancient Greeks and Romans in particular, they would laugh at it, like, well, we wouldn't drink this wine today. They want it diluted. They would have more of a spritz. So there's an evolution to it. There's a life of wine. It's always evolving. Not just in the bottle and the maturing aspect, but it's always evolving. It's becoming, it's a mystique liquid. It's a very mystique aspect to it. I always say, from a philosophical sense, are we addicted to it, or is it addicted to us?
I like that.
Yeah,
I like it.
Because it makes you think. If it's ever present. It's a really
so much. That's really true, because even the wine that they drank 50 years ago is nothing in comparison to what we're drinking now, and the next 10 years can be completely different. It also it's really susceptible to trends also, right? Some moments we love rosé, other moments we love it less. Then our rosé is super dark, then it's super light. It's always evolving, and it's also history repeating itself constantly. We started to put so many chemicals into the wine, and now we're going all back to biodynamic, organic farming, the way our grandparents did. It's just a whole, it's a cycle, right? It's a process.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, even with I know the studies are being done with the long-term aging of turn caps, long-term aging, how that's going to span out too. That's interesting too. So there's so much.
Yeah, crew caps. Yeah.
Yeah. How, what the long-term shelf life of aging is. These are all interesting aspects of wine. I mean, it's not, as we've said so many times, but I think it has to be always said, there's more to wine than the bottle. There's more to wine than just the color of this libaceous liquid. There's so much to it. I mean, especially as you were saying, with preference of trends and tastes. You go back to in North America, the 70s and early 70s and perhaps the early 80s, mid 80s, there was a big trend in German wines for whites, a big trend in sweeter wines. Sweeter wines were very popular. And then that took over for the French varietals, became more preeminent, more popular, and that more soily taste, more spice aspect, heavier bouquet became more prevalent in the North American market. And you see that, the changing and the returning too, the reappreciation of different wines. I personally, I for the last 3, maybe 4 summers now, I'd like to say I'm on a kick, but if it's a kick, it's a pretty long one. I'm really fascinated with the wines from Rioja. I think they're just extraordinary. They're just extraordinary. The spice aspect, it's so it's like drinking liquid fall.
Oh, I love that. That's true. It is. It is very, yeah, very seductive, I would say.
Right.
Very
Right.
like the fall with all its richness in colors and leaves and yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that is very. I think I like how you put that too. To me, it's a Heraclitean kind of beverage in the sense that the fall is a time of decay, but also it also gives birth to renewal in the spring.
Uh-huh.
So there's a kind of I like the philosophical as much as the gastronomic aspect to the Rioja wines. There's the wonderful bouquet, the deep richness to the color of the wine, but also the terroir gives us this great soil, gives us this spice box of flavor, this fall-like bouquet, which I think is, it ignites this idea, which, okay, it's time for a renewal now too. It's whatever you're drinking that evening, whatever you're eating that afternoon, spice it up. Add a Rioja, and your meal becomes elevated.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, I'm a fan too. I love it. I really like it. I think it's a wonderful wine. Very, very rich, very bold.
Definitely,
Very
definitely.
yeah.
And certainly, yeah. And there's so much. I mean, it is a wonderful world of wine in every sense. There's so much out there. Beyond even beyond the Europe, even within the European market, there's so many wines that I'm still discovering that I wasn't even aware of. I mean, there's the obvious ones like the Aglianico from Italy, the Primitivos, obviously the Super Tuscans, the Chiantis. There's just Nebbiolo, but there's so many. There's so many beyond even in French varietals, even Latin America. There's so many wines, so many types of wines, and the subsequent stories of how they became into being or how a particular estate became into being. It's incredible. It really is incredible. There's a whole life to wine in all its various forms.
It never ends. You can just keep on getting knowledge, reading about it, trying different wines. It never stops. That's what inspires me so much. It's a topic you never get tired of because you discover something new every day and you keep learning.
Right.
You just learning about it and you keep being surprised. And there's so many types of wine. You're never finished. You can never say I tasted all the wines in the world. You can never say that.
Right. No, it's an ever to be continued.
Mm-hmm.
It's an ever to be continued. You're never done. And even, as you rightly pointed out during the pre-chat, was something I hadn't really thought of before. I thought that was a good observation, was even when in one particular bottle, when you open it up, that bottle evolves and changes even from the moment the first glass, you let it open, it oxidizes, but even further, it changes if you have some for the next day, where are you leaving it? Are you putting it in the fridge? Are you leaving it out? There's an evolution to it, and it changes with you too. I think it's very much a symbiotic relationship. It changes with you. It changes with your mood, how you're feeling about it, the ups, the downs. It changes with you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think of the moment when you're on holiday and you're sitting on this beautiful beach looking at a sunset and you drink this local wine in the right temperature and you look at the view and you eat the local seafood and this wine is just amazing and it's the best wine you ever tasted. So you buy 6 bottles and you bring it home, and the moment you open it, it's so different. You're like, it's not even that good. But the moment just made it into
Yeah,
something so special, right? So the wine connects to your environment, to the moment, to your mood and everything what you said. And sometimes it can be a completely different wine when you drink it in another situation, and can be disappointing, but sometimes it can be super surprising, or it can be even better because maybe it was not yet aged enough and you left it 1 year longer in the cellar, and then it just got this amazing expression of exactly how it should be. So yeah,
yeah,
it's like a book. You never finish reading, and you can reread certain pages and discover something new. It just, it goes on and on. That's what's
absolutely.
so special.
Absolutely. Yes, I completely agree. And what are your thoughts too, India? What are your thoughts on young up and coming individuals who either getting into in some way the wine industry or
Mhm.
themselves just getting into wine, perhaps just saying, I don't really want to read a particular book or watch a particular review, but I want to get into wines. I want to incorporate more wine into my everyday life or into my life. I want to get more understanding of wines, beyond perhaps local wine. But what do you think should be the first step for somebody getting into wines?
I think the first step would be just a never-ending curiosity, because you can if you're curious, you can learn from everyone and everything. So being curious just means, instead of just sipping that wine and drinking it, to just taking one moment before. You don't have to become all, you know uh, difficult about it, trying to analyze everything, but just that 5 seconds before you really swallow that wine, just think of, what am I actually tasting? What am I smelling? Just this 5 seconds. Then you drink the wine with your friends. You don't have to stand still with every sip, but you can just change your perspective a little bit.
Right,
While first you're just swallowing, now you're just pausing one moment and let the wine speak to you.
right,
The next time you get another one, you do the same, and that's how you build your sort of vocabulary of wine aromas. How you start to recognize certain things. Oh, is it maybe a black cherry? Is it a red cherry? Is it slowly? Just by reading the wine labels, starting to see, oh, this is a blend. It's not just one varietal. This is a blend. Trying to remember a little bit of the grapes, and then of course we have the internet. It's this never-ending book of knowledge that we have access to. You can go on YouTube, you can go on Instagram, you can learn about wine everywhere. There's free wine courses online, there's paid wine courses online. So just by being curious, Googling, having a look, maybe visit some wineries if you're in a region where that is possible, or when you go on holiday, your next holiday, look around. Is there maybe a winery somewhere here? So many people go on holiday to Italy, right? There's
right,
always winery um, near the place that you're visiting. Even if you're going on a beach holiday with friends, maybe half an hour by car, maybe 20 minutes by motorbike, you find a winery. Go have a look, see how the wine is actually made, because that also changed a lot for me to finally really understand everything. When you read it in your books, it's interesting, but when you see what's happening, maybe go 1 week to help a harvest somewhere if you're really passionate.
right.
There's so many ways to get to know wine without having to dedicate your whole life to studying all books and staying in your house. You go out there and explore. There's a world to discover, I think.
Beautifully said. No, I couldn't add to any, I couldn't add, can't add to that. I can only agree. It's absolutely perfectly said. I go outside the book and go outside into the world and experience it. And like I said, talk with locals, experience local wine. You have reviews, read them, but also expand your vocabulary. I think that's a good one too. Using your own words too, using, not tried and tested, but using your own words, your own comparison from your own taste buds.
Yeah.
So, that's really, in keeping with that, what do you think makes, and I don't mean just like in the process of the production, but what do you think makes a good wine?
Mm.
Open-ended question.
Yeah. So the correct answer would be like a good wine is made by, yeah, what you said, the great conditions in the vineyard, the healthy grapes, a skillful winemaker, that would make a good wine. But I think what you're looking for is, for me, a good wine is something that I like to drink. A wine that I like to drink is a good wine, and that can be because of multiple reasons. It can be because maybe the wine is very skillfully made, and it's a very, very good wine with a long tradition and a long, long tradition. Some wines are just, are famous, and when you get to
Right.
drink them, and you know the story, you really pause for a moment and like, wow, this is a good wine.
Yeah.
I mean, we cannot, it's true many times, but there's also wines that are just so beautifully balanced, or they are so beautifully made in a place where it's maybe very difficult to make wine. And that
Yeah.
makes them special. For example, now I'm in Thailand. I tasted a Thai wine, which was a Colombar, so a French varietal, but grown here in a tropical climate. Was it the best white wine I ever tasted? Maybe not, but was it a good wine? Yes, because it was so authentic.
Right.
It had so much character. So it's a pleasure for me to drink it, because by drinking it, I discover a whole new world, and that's a good wine, right? A good wine
Right.
is something that expresses something to us, that makes us, that evokes an emotion, whatever emotion
Right.
that maybe it is. Well, maybe if it's really anger, then maybe the wine was not that good. But any other emotion, surprise, happiness, even you can get emotional from wine.
Right.
Sometimes you can cry because the wine is so interesting, so special. And yeah, good wine, there's no answer to that question, and there's 100,000 million answers to that question too.
I like that though. I like that because that would be it's similar to my own thinking, and the fact that my response to that question, it always goes beyond the vineyard. It goes beyond the production in many ways. I think
Mhm.
that's a technical thing. That's a beautiful thing. But for me, I always say, in keeping what you were just saying, actually, it's all those things for the reason that I think a good wine is like a person you want to hang out with.
uh-huh. I like that.
It's a person you want to hang
Yeah.
out. If it's dull and boring, you're like, oh, you look nice, you have a nice label, but you're boring. But if you're
Yeah.
complex, you're like, oh, this has character. There's history here. There's complexity. It's like an interesting person. You want to hang out with an interesting person. You know,
Yeah.
the
Yeah, I
label
like that.
the label might
There's
look great.
Yeah.
Like the suit, the clothing, the dress, the attire might look phenomenal, but then like, oh,
Yeah.
there's nothing there. There's
Yeah,
nothing there.
yeah, it's like what they say with dating, right? Good on paper, bad in bed. It can
Yeah.
go
Well, I
for
think
one.
yeah. I think that's why I was saying, as I said before, are we attracted to wine? Are we addicted to it, or is it addicted to us? Because there is a symbiotic relationship to it. It has an almost, or at least we've given it, I think, perhaps over millennia, is a very anthropologic aspect to it. I mean, we've deified wine with Dionysus. We've given it a physical person, but I think there is an anthropological understanding of it through its cultural aspects, through its connection with religion, with family, sadness, sorrows, as we've said. But it is in many ways a bad wine. Is you could say the way we describe it is the same way we would describe an uninteresting person. Like, oh yeah, you're all good looking. Look, your label's gorgeous, but there's nothing going on. You're just a very, very unimportant wine. And then
Yeah.
the opposite could be true. You could have a very simplistic label and a very
Hmm.
complex, very intricate wine, just like a human
Hmm.
being in many ways. I think that to me is how I always describe wine. It's the person you want to hang out with. It's a person you want to, as you were saying, good on paper, bad in bed. It's the same thing. Like, oh, you came across so good, but you're so boring.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I think
I'm
there's a
not. Mhm.
yeah, I think there's a great aspect. I think there's a great insight into that. I think a good wine very much is the person you want to hang out with. The
Yeah,
same qualities.
yeah, I like that a lot. Cool.
Yeah, in the same way, there are some wines that you want to have all year round, hang out with people all year round. And there's some people like you may only catch up with a few times a year, seasonally. In the same way, there's only some wines that are picked and produced at certain times of the year, like even the Feast of San Mateo. There's certain wines there. So there's so many. I think there's that connection too. It's just, for me, it just comes down to, do I like this wine? Do I want to hang out with this wine? Do I want to bring this wine home? Do I want to have a good meal with this wine?
It again. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. It's very interesting. I mean, the world of wine is an endless, as you say, I think it's an endless book. We're always discovering more. We're always writing more. We're always adding more to it. And I think subsequently, it also is always perpetually adding more to our repertoire of life, who we are as individuals, but who we are as human beings in the world. You know, it adds more to our spice of life and our stories.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, India, I have to say, this has been a salubrious, wonderful, complex discussion, and I've enjoyed every moment of it. It was an honor speaking with you here today, and I look forward to catching up with you down the road too.
Yeah, that will be very cool. Thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. It's so nice. I learned a lot from you, and I think you're doing great with your podcast. I really think I wish you all the success, and I'm sure we will talk again. And next time we'll get a glass of wine into the conversation, and
absolutely
bring something together, taste something together, and talk about the wine a little bit more. That would be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. That sounds great. And yes, I thank you for that too. I thank you for the compliment there, and I wish you the same too. Wine Spice Girl is something that I think is rightly shaking up the wonderful world of wine, and it's adding more spice to the world. So keep doing what you're doing, and stay curious.
Thank you so much.